Old Hollywood sold us heroes, cowboys who stood for justice, singers who made us feel warm inside, directors who created magic. But behind the studio lights, something darker was happening. There were actors who beat their own children until they bled, directors who tormented actresses for sport, studio bosses who destroyed careers with a single phone call. Some of them testified against their own colleagues and watched their lives fall apart. Others carried out violence in nightclubs and hotel lobbies without consequence. The Golden Age had a shadow nobody talked about: John Wayne. For decades, John Wayne stood as the face of rugged American strength. He rode horses, carried guns, and played the man who always knew right from wrong. But in May 1971, he said out loud what had been sitting under the image all along. In a Playboy interview with Richard Warren Lewis, Wayne spoke about race in words that now read like a warning sign. He said he believed in white supremacy until black Americans were educated to what he called responsibility. He said he did not believe in giving authority or leadership to people he viewed as irresponsible. When the topic turned to Native Americans, he went even further. He said he did not feel the country had done wrong by taking land from them and claimed they were selfish for trying to keep it. These were not slips of the tongue. They were calm statements from a man who felt justified. Those beliefs were not just talk. From 1949 onward, Wayne served as president of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals. In that role, he became a driving force behind Hollywood's blacklist. Screenwriter Carl Foreman, who wrote High Noon, later described a tense meeting where Wayne pressured him to crawl back to HUAC, admit he had once been a communist, and name names. When Foreman said he might find work in Europe, Wayne asked what made him think he would be allowed to leave the country. Not long after, Foreman was forced into exile in the United Kingdom. Wayne later admitted he felt no regret at all, openly saying he would never regret helping run Carl Foreman out of the country. That same anger showed itself in public. At the 1973 Oscars, Sachin Littlefeather stepped onto the stage to decline Marlon Brando's award in protest of Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans. Behind the scenes, Wayne exploded. He had to be physically restrained by 6 security guards to stop him from charging the stage. Oscars director Marty Pasetta later confirmed that Wayne wanted to go out there and drag her off himself. Nearly 50 years later, in 2022, the Academy issued a formal apology to Littlefeather for what she endured that night. Even at home, the image cracked. During his 1954 divorce, Wayne's second wife, Esperanza Bauer, publicly described him as a habitual drunk and an abusive husband. Court filings detailed charges and countercharges of drunken violence, painting a picture far removed from the steady cowboy audiences thought they knew. Bing Crosby. While Wayne projected toughness on screen, Bing Crosby projected warmth. He sang about snow, family, and peace, becoming the voice of comfort for generations. Behind closed doors, his home was ruled by fear. In 1983, his eldest son, Gary, published a memoir titled Going My Own Way. In it, he described a childhood shaped by routine violence. Gary wrote that Crosby beat his sons with a belt fitted with metal studs. The rule was simple and terrifying. The beating stopped at the first drop of blood. Gary said he used to hope he would bleed early. As the boys grew older, the belt was replaced with a cane. By the time Gary turned 18, one beating went too far. He grabbed the cane, snapped it over his knee, and told his father that if he ever hit him again, he would kill him. The violence stopped, but the damage did not. Crosby mocked Gary's weight, calling him fatty, and forced humiliating weigh-ins. Failure meant punishment. Summers were spent at a working ranch, where the boys were forced into hard labor they hated. Gary later traced his lifelong struggle with alcohol and drugs directly back to the abuse he endured as a child. The aftermath was devastating. On December 11, 1989, Lindsey Crosby shot himself with a rifle at age 51, reportedly after learning the inheritance he depended on was gone. On May 4, 1991, Dennis Crosby followed, taking his own life with a shotgun at age 56 while grieving his brother. Gary himself died of lung cancer in 1995 after 3 divorces and decades of addiction. All 4 sons from Bing Crosby's first marriage battled alcoholism and emotional ruin. Before his death, Lindsey confirmed Gary's story, saying he was glad the truth was finally out and hoped it would end years of lies and rumors. Joan Crawford. Christina Crawford finally spoke in 1978, and when her book Mommy Dearest came out, it cracked something open that Hollywood had tried to keep sealed. Over the years, some details were argued, and Christina herself later said the movie pushed certain moments too far. But the core truth stayed standing. The abuse was real, and the wire hangers were real too, just not in the cartoon way people remember. According to Christina, those nights often began quietly. Joan Crawford would storm into the children's rooms during what Christina called her night raids. She found a wire hanger once and lost control. She ripped the clothes off the hangers and threw them across the room. Then she grabbed Christina by the hair. With one hand, she pulled her head back. With the other, she slapped her ears again and again until they rang. All of it came with screaming about wire hangers, not as a joke, not as a moment, but as pure rage. That was only one piece of a larger pattern. Christina's brother, Christopher, was strapped into a sleep-safe harness at night so he could not even get up to use the bathroom. Christmas mornings were staged for photos. The children were allowed to keep only one gift, while the rest were taken away and sent to charity. One day, as punishment, Joan shredded Christina's favorite dress. Then, she forced her to wear what was left of it for an entire week. The humiliation was part of the point. Years later, the final proof arrived on paper. Joan Crawford's will was signed on October 28, 1976. In it, she wrote that she intentionally made no provision for her daughter Christina or her son Christopher, saying the reasons were well known to them. They contested the will and eventually received a settlement of just $27,500 each. It was a cold ending that matched the childhood they described. That cruelty did not stop with her children. On the set of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? In 1962, the hostility between Joan Crawford and Bette Davis turned physical. During a fight scene, Davis kicked Crawford in the head, hard enough to require stitches. Crawford responded quietly and carefully. For scenes where Davis had to drag her across the floor, Crawford filled her pockets with heavy weights. Davis strained her back, doing the takes. The rivalry reached its final public moment at the 1963 Oscars. Crawford was not nominated. She still arranged to accept the award if any absent winner won. When Anne Bancroft's name was called, Crawford walked onto the stage and accepted the Oscar while a stunned Davis watched from her seat. Alfred Hitchcock Cruelty wore a different mask with Alfred Hitchcock, but it was just as deliberate. Multiple people documented his behavior, and no one spoke more clearly than Tippi Hedren. Biographers later confirmed much of what she said, and Hitchcock himself once described actors as cattle. He never hid how he saw them. During the filming of The Birds in 1963, Hitchcock promised Hedren that the famous attic scene would use mechanical birds. That promise vanished the moment the cameras rolled. For 5 straight days, trainers hurled live birds at her. The experience was brutal, ugly, and relentless. The crew wore thick leather gloves. Hedren had nothing. When one bird nearly hit her eye, she broke down and told Hitchcock she was done. She was sent home for 5 days, officially signed off due to trauma. Cary Grant visited the set and told her she was the bravest woman he had ever seen. Off camera, it only got worse. Hitchcock followed her movements closely. He drove past her house at all hours. He had her followed. He had her handwriting analyzed. He installed a door that connected his office directly to her dressing room trailer. Cast and crew were told not to speak to her. When she rejected his advances, including an incident in his limousine where she said he threw himself on top of her and tried to kiss her, he told her he would ruin her career. He kept his word. Hitchcock held her under contract and refused to let other studios cast her for 3 years. Her work slowed to almost nothing. Even his wife Alma reportedly apologized to Hedren, telling her she was sorry she had to endure it. Hitchcock's cruelty often hid behind jokes, but the damage was real. He once bet a crew member that he could not spend a night chained to his camera. Then he spiked the man's brandy with laxatives. The crew member was found the next morning weeping and covered in his own feces. Hitchcock handcuffed actors together and pretended to lose the key. He sent Peter Lorre a custom-made suit sized for a child after an argument. He invited an actor to what he called a costume party. The man arrived in full Scottish kilt and face paint, only to discover every other guest was dressed in formal black tie. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra carried a public image that felt smooth and untouchable, but behind it ran a long record of violence that followed him for decades. It started early, and it stayed consistent. On April 8th into April 9th, 1947, outside Ciro's nightclub, columnist Lee Mortimer crossed paths with him. Mortimer later said he was leaving when Sinatra and 3 other men jumped him, and the next thing he knew, he was on the floor. Police records show Sinatra was arrested for assault and battery, and the case ended with a $9,000 out-of-court settlement. Years later, after Mortimer had died, Sinatra drove to his grave and urinated on it. He later told a friend that Mortimer had written against him caused him grief. grief and that he finally got back at him. As the years passed, the behavior did not soften. In 1973, at a pre-inauguration party for Richard Nixon, Washington Post columnist Maxine Cheshire asked Sinatra about his mafia connections. Witnesses said the moment shifted instantly. Sinatra publicly humiliated her, telling her to get away, calling her scum, and telling her to go home and take a bath. He then called her a $2 prostitute, stuffed two $1 bills into her wine glass, and told her that was what she was used to. He refused to apologize afterward and made the incident into a joke on stage, telling audiences he had overpaid her. In September 1967, his rage exploded at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. After Howard Hughes bought the hotel and cut off Sinatra's $200,000 gambling credit, police and hotel records show Sinatra trashed his penthouse suite. He smashed furniture, ripped wires from the switchboard, drove a baggage cart through a plate glass window, and tried to set curtains on fire. When Casino Vice President Carl Cohn confronted him the next morning, Sinatra flipped over Cohen's breakfast table, spilling hot coffee everywhere, and unleashed anti-Jewish slurs. Cohn punched him, knocking loose the caps on Sinatra's front teeth. The pattern continued. In 1970, at Caesar's Palace, Sinatra attacked Vice President Sanford Waterman after being denied high-stakes baccarat credit, squeezing his throat so hard it left visible marks. In 1966, at the Beverly Hills Hotel, a confrontation with Frederick R. Wiseman over vulgar language escalated so badly that Wiseman ended up hospitalized and barely survived. Even inside his own home, the violence followed him. Ava Gardner later said they were fighting all the time, drinking heavily, and that some of those fights turned violent. Jerry Lewis presented a very different public face, but the damage he left behind was just as deep. A 2022 Vanity Fair investigation led by filmmakers Kirby Dick and Amy Ziering pulled together decades of testimony describing him as cruel, volatile, and driven by insecurity. Actress Karen Sharp spoke about a 1964 incident during the filming of The Disorderly Orderly. During what was supposed to be a wardrobe fitting in his private office, she said Lewis grabbed her, began fondling her, and unzipped his pants. She said she was frozen in shock. When she protested, his mood flipped. He retaliated by ordering everyone on set not to speak to her, threatening fines for anyone who did. He refused to rehearse with her and only acknowledged her when the cameras were rolling. Another actress, Hope Holliday, said she had known Lewis since she was 13. In 1961, she described his dressing room as a place where he had a button to lock women inside. She said she was trapped while he talked dirty to her and opened his pants. The experience left her deeply shaken and depressed, and she said it affected her ability to date for years afterward. Lewis openly admitted he was a bully during his partnership with Dean Martin, once saying Martin was nothing to him but a dollar sign. After their split in 1956, they did not speak for 20 years. That cruelty did not stop with colleagues. It reached his own family. He had 6 sons and became estranged from every one of them. In his 2012 will, he explicitly excluded Gary Lewis, Ronald Lewis, Anthony Joseph Lewis, Christopher Joseph Lewis, Scott Anthony Lewis, and Joseph Christopher Lewis, along with their descendants, from inheriting anything. His estimated $50,000 estate went to his second wife and adopted daughter instead. His sons later spoke about years of physical and emotional abuse. Anthony said that growing up, you never knew which version of Jerry Lewis would walk through the door at night. Gary publicly called his father a mean and evil person and blamed him for the spiral that led to his brother Joseph's death from a drug overdose in 2009. When Jerry Lewis died, Gary, Ron, and Anthony were not invited to their father's funeral. Harry Cohn liked power when it felt visible. In 1933, he traveled to Rome and met Benito Mussolini, and something clicked in his mind the moment he stepped inside Palazzo Venezia. He did not just admire it, he copied it. When he returned, he rebuilt his Columbia Pictures office to mirror Mussolini's space and kept a signed photograph of the dictator on his desk until World War II. His desk sat on an 8-inch riser, so anyone who entered had to look up while he looked down. People were not summoned freely. Cohn used an electronic buzzer and made visitors wait outside, convinced that every extra minute stripped them of confidence. He once said the longer they waited, the weaker they became, and he ran his studio by that rule. Inside Columbia, fear was normal. Employees called it a private police state because Cohn wanted to hear everything. He installed listening devices on sound stages and could tune into any conversation at will. If something annoyed him, him, his voice would suddenly blast through a loudspeaker and freeze everyone in place. He went further and bugged actresses' dressing rooms too. He never hid how he saw himself. He openly bragged that he built Columbia with spit and wire and his fists. He admitted to stealing, cheating, and crushing people to get what he wanted. And he said it like a victory speech. Rita Hayworth felt that power more than most. She was born Margarita Cancino and came from a Spanish-American background that Cohn believed was wrong for stardom. He forced her to change her name, dye her hair, and endure painful electrolysis treatments for a full year to erase her hairline and reshape her image. While reshaping her career, he also pursued her relentlessly. He demanded she sleep with him. When she refused, he stalked her movements and punished her financially. Her rise came with constant pressure and quiet threats that never fully stopped. The control reached beyond his own studio wall. In 1957, actress Kim Novak fell in love with Sammy Davis Jr., a black entertainer, and that alone triggered panic. Cohn contacted organized crime figures in Chicago. According to Arthur Silber Jr., Davis's closest friend, Davis was threatened with losing his remaining eye or having his legs broken if he did not marry a black woman within 2 days. Within hours, Davis paid singer Lorraine White to marry him. The relationship with Novak ended immediately, not with a goodbye, but with fear. Even actors looking for work learned quickly who they were dealing with. When Peter Falk, who had lost an eye to cancer at age 3, met Cohn to discuss roles, the answer came without hesitation. Cohn told him that for the same price, he could get an actor with 2 eyes. The meeting ended there. When Harry Cohn died in 1958, more than 2,000 people attended his funeral. Comedian Red Skelton delivered the line everyone remembered, saying it proved what Harry always believed, that if you give the public what they want, they will come out for it. Many whispered that people showed up not out of love, but to make sure he was really gone. Louis B. Mayer. While Cohn ruled through intimidation, Louis B. Mayer ruled through ownership. At MGM, he treated stars as property, and Judy Garland was trapped inside that system as a child. According to Gerald Clark's biography, based on Garland's unpublished 68-page memoir, the abuse began when she was still a teenager. Mayer praised her voice and told her she sang from the heart, then placed his hand on her left breast to show where that heart was. Garland later said she often thought she was lucky she did not sing with another part of her body. When she finally confronted him, Mayer turned the moment into emotional manipulation and asked how she could say such a thing to someone who loved her. The control over her body never stopped there. MGM put Garland on diet pills starting at age 12 and used amphetamines to keep her awake through brutal workdays. She lived under constant surveillance with chaperones watching her day and night, even following her to the bathroom. Her meals were controlled down to the bite. Chicken soup, black coffee, and cigarettes became routine. On her own birthday, she was denied cake. Every rule was enforced in the name of productivity. Mayer's cruelty extended to those who challenged him. Actor John Gilbert learned that the hard way. In 1926, at Gilbert's wedding to Greta Garbo, who never showed up, Mayer mocked him with a crude remark about why he bothered marrying her at all. Gilbert reacted instantly and punched Mayer, slamming his head against the wall. Mayer responded calmly and promised that Gilbert was finished and that he would destroy him even if it cost $1 million. From that moment on, Gilbert was placed in weak roles with mediocre directors. His career collapsed and he died at 38, broken professionally and personally. Elizabeth Taylor later summed Mayer up in one word. She called him a monster. For nearly 17 years, he controlled when MGM stars worked, slept, ate, appeared in public, dated, married, and divorced. Everything flowed through him, and once someone fell out of favor, there was no exit that did not leave scars. Walt Disney. Walt Disney spent decades presenting himself as a warm family man, but behind that image, there was another side that quietly shaped Hollywood. On October 24, 1947, he sat before the House Un-American Activities Committee as a friendly witness, calm and confident, and when asked if communists had worked at his studio, he did not hesitate. He said yes, that in the past, he had people he felt were communists. From there, the names started coming. Union organizer Herbert Sorrell was mentioned, even though he was later cleared of all charges. Art Heinemann, an art director, was named and blacklisted. Animator David Hilberman was named and blacklisted as well. Phil Eastman was pushed so far into the shadows that he had to work secretly in back rooms for years just to survive. That moment did not come out of nowhere. Years earlier, in 1941, the animators' strike had already exposed deep cracks weeks inside Disney's studio. Pay made no sense. A handful of top animators earned as much as $300 a week, while others struggled on $12 a week. Resentment built slowly and then exploded. When Art Babbitt, the creator of Goofy and one of Disney's most trusted animators, supported union organizing, Disney fired him. More than 200 employees walked out. Disney responded by taking out an ad in Variety, insisting he was convinced that communist agitation and leadership caused the strike. While the walkout dragged on, he approved scenes in Dumbo that portrayed striking workers as greedy circus clowns. The message was clear, and it landed hard. There was also the question of credit. For decades, Walt Disney was celebrated as the creator of Mickey Mouse, but the truth was more complicated. Bob Ewerks was the actual designer and animator, and he carried an impossible workload. He animated the first Mickey cartoon almost entirely by himself, producing up to 700 drawings a day. Disney accepted the praise anyway. At one party, when a child asked Disney to draw Mickey, he passed the pen to Iwerks and joked that he should draw it while Walt signed. Iwerks snapped back, telling him to draw his own Mickey, and walked away. By 1930, Iwerks had left the studio, officially citing personal differences, but privately pointing to Disney's refusal to share fair credit. Inside story meetings, Disney's language could be just as revealing. During discussions for Snow White, he referred to a scene where the dwarfs piled on each other using a racial slur. Later, during casting for Song of the South, he used the term pickaninny. The NAACP condemned the film outright, and the damage did not stop there. James Baskett, who played Uncle Remus, was barred from attending the Atlanta premiere because of segregation. The family-friendly empire was built alongside choices that left real scars. Marlon Brando. That same industry also made room for Marlon Brando, a man whose talent was undeniable, but whose behavior often made everyone else's job miserable. Over 4 decades, stories piled up, confirmed by co-stars, directors, and Brando himself. One of the earliest wounds came during On the Waterfront in 1954. Brando had a clause allowing him to leave the set at 4 p.m. for therapy. During the famous contender scene, Rod Steiger stayed through Brando's close-ups to help him. When it was time to shoot Steiger's close-ups, Brando had already left. A stage manager read his lines instead. Steiger never forgot it. Even by 2000, he was still openly bitter, still talking about the betrayal. By the time Superman came around in 1978, Brando's reputation was locked in. He earned $3.7 million plus 11.75% of the back end for less than 20 minutes on screen. His contract limited him to 12 days of work and promised an extra $1 million for every day production ran late. He refused to learn his lines. According to Cary Elwes, who was just 16 at the time and working as a set runner, Brando had to be lured out of his trailer with food. Christopher Reeve later summed it up bluntly on Late Night in 1982, saying Brando did not care and simply took the money and ran. Apocalypse. Now in 1979 pushed things even further. Brando arrived badly overweight for a role written as Gaunt. He refused to shave his head. For the first 4 days, he would not come to set at all. Instead, he wandered into Francis Ford Coppola's trailer to talk about random subjects while collecting his $3.5 million fee, which broke down to roughly $1 million a week. He refused to work directly with Dennis Hopper, forcing the production to shoot them separately and stitch the scenes together in editing. Then came The Island of Dr. Moreau in 1996, a production that became infamous almost overnight. Brando refused to memorize his lines, relying on an assistant feeding him dialogue through an earpiece. David Thewlis recalled scenes where Brando suddenly stopped acting and repeated police chatter he was hearing, announcing robberies in the middle of takes. He demanded that his character be revealed as a dolphin in the final scene. He insisted on wearing an ice bucket as a hat and got his way. To make matters worse, he reportedly ate large amounts of cabbage before scenes so he could deliberately produce unbearable odors and torment Val Kilmer. Screenwriter Ron Hutchinson later said Brando seemed hell-bent on sabotaging the film. One of the darkest moments, though, came from Brando watching someone else's cruelty. During A Countess from Hong Kong in 1967, he witnessed Charlie Chaplin publicly humiliating his own son Sidney in front of the cast. Sidney confided that his father treated all his children that way. Brando never forgot it. Years later, when asked about Chaplin, he gave a chilling verdict, saying Chaplin was probably the most sadistic man he had ever met. In an industry fueled by brilliance, ego, and power, the line between genius and cruelty was often thin, and the damage lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling.